Well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to be talking about one of our projects. It's a stormwater separation project, one of our many, and I like my introduction. I've seen it all. I have not seen it all, because every time you think you've seen it all, something new comes up. And that's the thing that's great about stormwater. It's always, every project's a new adventure. So, this project, so just to give you a little background about the city of Spokane. We have about a third of our city is CSO, and about a third of it is MS4, the separated stormwater system. And then the rest of the city, that other third, is either drains well, and has been developed later, in the later years, since about the 1980s, so that we have bioretention, that's our standard. Or it doesn't drain at all, and we do evaporation ponds. So the CSO is most of the old part of the city. Most of the areas have been separated out of the CSO system. This area, the north central or west central neighborhood, happens to be an area that never got separated when we did that back in the 80s to separate the storm. So as we went through and did our integrated plan, these basins actually came up. We did an integrated clean water plan, and this basin came out as being most cost effective to separate. These are the only two basins that came out of cost effective for separation. The rest of them, storage was the most cost effective solution. To give you a little kind of background of what is this west central neighborhood like. There it is right next to the river. You can see if I can figure this laser. Oh, look, here's the river, goes all the way around. And these are our basin boundaries. The west central, this historic neighborhood is right in the center. Kind of give you some ideas. My favorite, of course, is Doyle, the famous ice cream. They make their own ice cream. It's an awesome place. It's been around for a while. Just to give you an idea of the demographics, the people that live in this area are generally young. They're generally low education. They generally don't make a lot of money. A lot of historic houses in this area. We'll talk more about that. This is an area is affectionately known as Felony Flats. It's right next to the courthouse, and historically I was told that when someone got out of jail, out of the county jail, that's where they would go live. It's now been, some people like to call it misdemeanor meadows because it's got a lot of gentrification. There's been some new development, but it gives you kind of a feel. It's a kind of a mixed neighborhood. And this is what it looks like. There's a lot of mature trees. There's lots of houses. The only parking they have is right in front of their house. They don't have a garage. It's compact houses. And the other part of this is, so parking is really a challenge. That's one of our biggest challenges on this project, was trying to figure out where we're going to put stormwater facilities and still have a place for people to park. We also have a school, that upper one here. There's a school, and anybody that's been around a school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's not enough parking, and then there's a lot of congestion. So we were looking at doing bump outs in that area, and that's kind of that's conflict. How do we live together? And the neighborhood loves their old trolley tracks. We'd like to just remove them because they're like in the way, but they're like, no, we love them. So, and how can you argue with something that they love? So the basins themselves, the impervious area, and that's what we're working on, because that's what we're trying to manage, is the runoff in the roadway, in the street. It's not huge, the impervious area. We're 21 acres. But the problem is, we've got that sanitary sewer, and the catch basins go directly to the sanitary sewer. We looked at, as we went through this the early analysis, we thought, well, maybe we can just, and every one of those meant we put a conveyance system in, which added too much cost to the project. We couldn't afford that. The basins themselves, though, is the area that's got relatively good draining soil, and not very steep. It's pretty minimal grades. So in Spokane, we have a regional manual, and we have a method. What our requirements are: we treat the 6-month storm, and we have to contain that 10-year storm. That's some of the requirements from our manual. It's what we do all our design based on. But for this, what was different is this is a combined sewer basin. we're not trying to meet the requirements of our stormwater manual. We're trying not to overflow. Our goal for our CSO basins is to reduce our overflow to less than 1 per year over a 20-year average. Now you think, well, we're going to manage stormwater. That became a big deal because when we did our integrated plan, we actually went through and did 20 years of historic rainfall. From that 20 years of historic rainfall, each basin, we selected a risk that we wanted to assign to that basin based on how comfortable we would feel in meeting that 1 overflow per year. For this basin, we assigned the 18th ranked storm. So for the last 20 years, the top 18th storm was what we designed this basin for. Well, the CSO program itself was designed to our design storm was a 1.2 year storm. That got to be a conflict of what are we really designing for? And we'll have to talk about that a little bit. So that's once was a stormwater project. We're in an existing neighborhood. It's historic. It's got things the neighbors love. It's a very active neighborhood. Neighborhoods are listened to very closely in Spokane. A lot of them I know have a direct, I know that's on their speed dial is to call the mayor because, you know, they'll call the mayor and then we could get a message from the mayor, what's going on with this project? So our objectives were to reduce those overflows, but we also had a budget. We had budgeted for a big program, but we had about $3.5 million to build this. And also, what's different, a little different about the city of Spokane is we are not a stormwater utility. We are a city. We have a wastewater department that has that manages stormwater, combined sewer, and sanitary sewer. And we have a street department that manages all the streets. And we have one public works director that is the boss of both of those. So we can't just say, well, you know, we're going to build it, let those other people take care of it. Those other people are our neighbors, and they'll be in a meeting, and they'll say, what are you doing? And so, you know, we are counter to that from the beginning. So some of the challenges we have is what we like to call state-of-the-art engineering. That means we can't find a manual to follow. We have to kind of engineer that on our own. That parking was huge. There's also, because of the low-income population, the bus service is really important. And you can see here we've got a picture of the bus. And we had to make sure whatever we put into that right-of-way that we can fit a bus. Some of the streets are really narrow, and you'll see that in the next map. So choices of where we could actually fit basins was a challenge. And we also are trying to stay within budget. So replacing long sections of street was really, we couldn't afford that. So when we went to look at where we want to do this, that was one of the things we wanted to avoid. We wanted to make this in a way we could afford in an area and also avoid those trolley tracks. And next, oh, sorry, that was... So here's what we came up with. This is our first idea. We identified every area. I actually went and met with our planning department. I said, okay, we got to go and build this through the basin. What do you think? Throughout all this neighborhood. And they said, well, you can make a bigger impact if you make features at intersections. And I said, cool, we'll do intersections. Intersections make sense to us. So we identified the intersections we felt that actually had stormwater to manage. It was we would have to take all of them. We didn't necessarily have to take all of them, but those are the ones we initially identified. Then we did our stormwater manual, came with how much that was going to cost. This is what we came up with. We used the stormwater manual, 18 acres, over 200 what we call bioretention swales. When we actually went back and recalculated that to what we needed to not overflow, we actually could reduce that to 13 acres. It actually was like 11.75, but we had a little bit of safety factor in there, so we did 13 acres. Because you know, it's really hard to get that exact 11.75 acreage when you start figuring out area. So this is what we ended up with. We brought this to the neighborhood. See how nice that looks? Our next step was, we did the estimate. So lesson learned here, do the estimate first before you do your graphics. Look at all these cool things. Look at that cool planting plan we're coming up with. And we were going to do all these cool things. Well, it turns out we were over budget. We couldn't afford ourselves. That's one of our mottos at the city, is we want to be able to afford ourselves. So, you know, we like this because we know how to maintain these things. It was standard, it was following the manual, it was all great, but it was over budget, and you know, we were gonna, significant impacts to parking. The other thing we found, because this is every intersection, and the way we have to connect to our water system to actually irrigate for those, and we're trying not to tear up the whole intersection, to repave it, it was gonna cost, I think we were talking around 10% of the project was gonna be for irrigation, just to irrigate those things. So we thought, okay, wait a minute, we better take a step back. So we actually looked at storage, and we thought, well, you know, we've done these. We've done a lot of storages. That's our cool-looking storage. We built. We're going to be building about 20 of those in Spokane this time next year. So we looked at that and thought, well, you know, when you build just one structure, it is a lower capital cost, and it's something we know how to maintain. But you know, we're really not getting the water quality achievement. That was the biggest argument. Was we're not getting the water quality achievement. We're still sending all that stormwater to the treatment plant. Our treatment plant, we're figuring, costs about $2,000 for every 1,000,000 gallons we send there. But you know, that's every drop of rain that goes there. So that adds up. But also the maintenance costs. When you start looking at maintenance, when we looked at a life cycle cost, actually storage itself came out more expensive. So I got a great group of people I work with, and one of our staff came up with an idea. Why don't we do soil cells? Has done this one project. We've looked at it for another one. And we said, well, I don't know, will ecology allow that? Can we do that? And we found, yes, it's just considered a bioretention. And the cool thing about that is it actually is underground. You have to have a tree, but we can have parking on top of it. We can have sidewalk on top of it. We can live together in this neighborhood and keep the trolley tracks. So what that made, and that made a difference, because that trolley track street, we said, well, no way we can do anything. With this, we actually can fit them in and not disturb the trolley tracks. So look at this. I mean, this just should tell you right here, look at how many advantages versus our disadvantages. The thing we don't like about it, we've never done it in Spokane. We don't know how much it's really going to cost. We don't know how much it's going to, we don't know about maintenance. So we called Boise, City of Boise. They use these all the time. We felt pretty comfortable. So we're going to keep going with this. This is our final map. So we decided to simplify things to do the north-south streets, because we thought, you know, well, we'll just pick a couple streets and just be able to manage there to make construction easier. The other thing, since we've never done these, this is a residential neighborhood. We thought it'd be a lot easier to have a contractor learn how to do these in a neighborhood that you impact a few streets rather than our major arterial that everybody in the city is angry at us because it's taking too long to do. So overall, our lessons learned. Understand your goal at the beginning. We kind of went a few times back and forth because we were like, well, what are we really designing for? Well, we don't have to do the stormwater manual, it's CSO. Well, we don't have to do the 1.2 year, we're doing this, the 18th storm. And the life cycle costs, those are huge. You know, we want to afford ourselves throughout, not just capital, but also in maintenance. Because, you know, from the utility perspective, we all come out of that same pot of money, and we have to figure out how to live within our means. Space, when we do a retrofit, space is the hugest problem we have, trying to live with things that are already there. A lot of times we find that people are even, what they have in our right-of-way is difficult to make changes to. And the communication, that West Central neighborhood is very vocal. They have a lot of opinions and they want to be heard. And then, creative solutions. That's what really made a solution here. So one of the things that came out of this is that the neighborhood wants to do some traffic calming. So we're going to do some bump outs there, some bulb outs at a couple intersections along this street. Then they're applying for some other grant funding to actually be able to do. So they'll have a full street that they'll have these pedestrian bump outs, so pedestrian amenity. And we're designing it right now. Going to put it out to bid late this year and finish construction next year. And I want to take a minute to recognize everybody that's worked on that. That's all my team that has worked on this project. And, that's kind of, usually we have one or two people. Everybody ended up touching this because we kept going. It was just a lot of challenges, a lot of thinking. And with that, that's all I have for my presentation. I'll take any questions.